The mining laser cut through the asteroid's crust like a hot knife through butter. Captain Sarah Chun watched the readings on her screen as her salvage ship, the Resilience, slowly carved its way into the dead rock floating in the Kepler system. "Another abandoned site," muttered Rosa Martinez, the ship's engineer. She wiped sweat from her forehead as she monitored the cutting equipment. "Third one this month." Dr. Marcus Webb looked up from his medical station. The Zephyrians left these places in a hurry. Whatever made them run must have been serious. Sarah nodded. The fox-like alien race had abandoned dozens of mining operations across this sector 6 months ago. No one knew why. The Galactic Council claimed it was due to resource depletion, but Sarah had seen the reports. These asteroids still held plenty of valuable materials. "Captain," called out Anton Volkov from the communications station, "we're getting weird readings from inside the asteroid. There's still power running to some sections." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Power? After 6 months?" "Emergency backup systems, maybe," Rosa suggested. "Could be worth checking out." Sarah made her decision. "Dock us to the main entrance. Full environmental suits, everyone. We don't know what we might find in there." The airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. Sarah led her crew of 4 into the abandoned Zephyrian facility. Their helmet lights cut through the darkness, revealing empty corridors and scattered equipment. The aliens had left in such a rush that personal belongings still lay scattered on the floor. "This place gives me the creeps," Anton whispered into his unit. Dr. Webb stopped at what looked like a medical station. "Look at this." They left medical supplies behind. Medicine, food, even emergency oxygen tanks. "That doesn't make sense," Sarah said. "No one leaves emergency supplies unless they're planning to come back soon." They moved deeper into the facility. The emergency power was indeed still running, casting red warning lights across the metal walls. Sarah's team spread out to cover more ground, each checking different sections of the complex. "Captain," Rosa's voice crackled through the comm system, "you need to see this. I'm in what looks like a residential section. There's something here." Sarah and the others rushed to Rosa's location. They found her standing in front of a sealed door marked with Zephyrian symbols. "I can't read the writing," Rosa said, "but look at these power readings. Whatever's behind this door is using most of the facility's remaining power." Dr. Webb scanned the symbols with his translator device. His face went pale behind his helmet visor. "It says nursery, emergency protocol active." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Nursery? Are you saying there might be—" "Children," Webb finished. "There might be children in there." Sarah didn't hesitate. "Rosa, can you get this door open?" The engineer nodded and connected her tools to the door's control panel. After several tense minutes, the door slid open with a soft whoosh. Warm air flowed out, carrying a sweet, musky scent. What they found inside made them all gasp. 6 small forms lay in individual pods along the far wall. Each pod was about the size of a human child's bed, filled with soft bedding and connected to life support systems. The occupants were tiny Zephyrian cubs, no bigger than house cats. Their iridescent fur had lost its shine, and their small bodies looked painfully thin. "Oh no," Anton breathed. "They're just babies." Dr. Webb immediately began scanning them with his medical equipment. "They're alive, but barely. Severe malnutrition, dehydration. These life support pods have been keeping them alive, but just barely." Sarah stared at the tiny creatures. Their large eyes were closed, and their breathing was shallow and rapid. "How long have they been here?" "Based on their condition, I'd say they've been alone for at least 4 months, Webb replied. "Maybe longer." Rosa checked the power systems. "These pods are running on emergency power. At current usage, they have maybe 2 days of power left." 2 days? Sarah felt anger building in her chest. These people just left babies here to die? It doesn't make sense, Webb said as he gently examined one of the cubs. Zephyrians value their young. They would never abandon them unless what? Webb looked uncomfortable. Unless these cubs were considered unfit. In Zephyrian society, weak offspring are sometimes left to die naturally. It's how they maintain genetic strength. Anton cursed in 3 different languages. That's barbaric. Sarah looked at the 6 small forms in their pods. Even unconscious and starving, she could see intelligence in their features. Their small hands had delicate fingers that twitched as they dreamed. Whatever dreams starving children had. We're taking them, Sarah said firmly. Captain, Webb said carefully, we don't have the facilities to care for Zephyrian young. We don't even know what they eat or what kind of environment they need. Then we'll figure it out, Sarah snapped. I'm not leaving babies to die. I don't care what species they are. Rosa was already disconnecting the portable life support units. I can rig something in the cargo bay. Give me a few hours and I'll have a proper environment set up. What about the authorities? Anton asked. Shouldn't we contact the Zephyrian government? Sarah looked at the medical readings Dr. Webb was showing her. These cubs won't survive the journey to Zephyrian space. And even if they did, what do you think would happen to them? They were already abandoned once. Webb nodded slowly. The captain's right. Our best option is to stabilize them here, and then figure out long-term care. This could cause a diplomatic incident, Anton warned. Sarah carefully picked up one of the cubs. It was so light she could barely feel its weight through her suit gloves. Let me worry about the diplomats. Right now, these babies need help, and we're the only ones here to give it. The crew worked quickly to transfer the cubs and their life support equipment to the ship. As they prepared to leave the abandoned facility, Sarah took one last look around the nursery. Food containers sat empty on shelves. Toys lay scattered on the floor. Someone had cared for these cubs once, but when the time came to evacuate, they had made a choice. Sarah had made her choice too. As the Resilience pulled away from the asteroid. 6 small lives depended entirely on the compassion of humans who had stumbled upon them by accident. Sarah didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain. No child would die on her watch. Not if she could help it. The cargo bay of the Resilience had been transformed into something that looked more like a nursery than a storage area. Rosa had worked for 18 straight hours to set up environmental controls that could mimic the Zephyrian homeworld. Soft lights provided warmth without being too bright, and the air was humidified to match the readings from the cubs. Original life support pods. Dr. Webb knelt beside the makeshift beds they had created for the 6 cubs. 3 days had passed since the rescue, and while the cubs were stable, they still hadn't opened their eyes. Their vital signs are improving, Webb told Captain Chen as she entered the bay. But they're still critically weak. I've never worked with Zephyrian physiology before. Sarah looked down at the tiny forms wrapped in soft blankets. The cubs were slightly larger than Earth cats, with fur that shimmered between blue and silver when the light hit it right. Their ears were oversized for their heads, and their small muzzles twitched as they slept. Have you figured out what they eat? Sarah asked. Anton Volkov looked up from where he was preparing another batch of food mixture. It's been trial and error. The database says young Zephyrians drink milk from their mothers for the first 6 months, then gradually move to meat and fruits. But we don't have Zephyrian milk, Rosa pointed out as she adjusted the temperature controls. No, but I've been experimenting, Anton said with pride. I mixed nutrients from our medical supplies with synthesized proteins. Dr. Webb analyzed it and thinks it should work. Webb nodded. It's not perfect, but it contains the amino acids and vitamins they need. The problem is getting them to eat. That had been the biggest challenge. The cubs were so weak they couldn't even lift their heads to feed. Webb had to use feeding tubes, carefully measuring each portion to avoid overfeeding their shrunken stomachs. Maybe they need something else, Sarah suggested. What about comfort? Warmth from another living being? The crew exchanged glances. None of them were experts in childcare, human or otherwise. Worth trying, Webb agreed. Sarah carefully picked up one of the cubs, the smallest of the group. It weighed almost nothing, and she could feel its tiny heartbeat against her chest. The cub made a soft whimpering sound and instinctively curled closer to her body warmth. I think it likes that, Anton observed. Over the next few hours, each crew member took turns holding the cubs. Rosa discovered that gentle humming seemed to calm them. Anton found that one cub responded well to having its forehead gently stroked. Webb noticed that they breathed easier when they could hear human heartbeats. On the fourth day, something wonderful happened. Sarah was holding the smallest cub when she felt it stir in her arms. Slowly, two large eyes opened and looked up at her. The eyes were a startling shade of gold with flecks of green, and they held an intelligence that took Sarah's breath away. "Hello there, little one," Sarah whispered. The cub blinked slowly, studying her face. Then, to everyone's amazement, it made a soft chittering sound and reached up with one tiny paw to touch Sarah's cheek. "I think it recognizes you," Webb said quietly. Cubs imprint on whoever feeds and cares for them. Over the next few days, all 6 cubs awakened. Each one seemed to bond with different crew members. The smallest, which Sarah had taken to calling Star because of the star-shaped marking on its forehead, rarely left her side. 2 others, Twin and Spot, attached themselves to Rosa and delighted in watching her work on engineering projects. Anton gained 2 followers who seemed fascinated by the sounds and smells from the kitchen. Dr. Webb found himself caring for the last cub, a quiet one that seemed content to observe everything with careful attention. The cubs grew stronger every day. They began eating solid food, though Anton had to prepare special mixtures that their developing digestive systems could handle. They started to explore their environment, though always staying close to their chosen humans. "Look at this," Rosa said one morning. She was showing Twin and Spot how to operate a simple tool when both cubs picked up the concept immediately. They understood in minutes what takes most species hours to learn. Dr. Webb was equally impressed by his quiet cub's ability to observe and remember. "Luna here," he said, having named the cub for its moon-like silver fur, "watches everything I do. Yesterday, I saw her trying to mimic my medical scanning motions." Anton's 2 cubs, Pepper and Salt, named for their contrasting fur colors, had learned to help in the kitchen by sorting ingredients and even operating simple controls with their small paws. But it was Star who surprised everyone the most. "Sarah," Dr. Webb called out one evening. "Come here. You need to see this." Sarah found Webb and Star in the medical bay. The cub was sitting on the examination table, and when she saw Sarah, she opened her mouth and made a sound that was unmistakably human. "Sir," Star said carefully, her golden eyes fixed on Sarah's face. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes. "She said my name." "They're incredibly intelligent," Webb explained. "Their brains develop much faster than human children. At this rate, they'll be speaking in full sentences within weeks." The crew established routines around caring for the cubs. They took shifts so that someone was always available when the cubs needed attention. They created games and learning exercises. Rosa taught them about tools and engineering concepts. Anton shared cooking and food preparation. Webb showed them medical equipment and basic anatomy. Sarah taught them navigation and problem solving, but more than education. The humans gave the cubs something they had never received from their own kind: unconditional love and acceptance. "You know," Rosa said one day as she watched Twin successfully repair a simple circuit, "in Zephyrian society, these cubs would have been considered genetic failures. Too small, too weak to survive. Idiots, Anton growled. Look at them now. It was true. The cubs had grown noticeably larger and stronger. Their fur had regained its natural shimmer, and their eyes were bright and alert. They moved with increasing confidence and coordination. But more than their physical improvement, their personalities were emerging. Star was curious and brave, always the first to investigate new things. Twin and Spot worked together like a perfectly coordinated team. Pepper was playful and mischievous, while Salt was methodical and careful. Luna was the philosopher of the group, always thinking before acting. They're not weak at all, Sarah said as she watched Star successfully navigate a complex puzzle box that Rosa had created. They were just underfed and neglected. Dr. Webb nodded. In Zephyrian society, only the strongest and most aggressive cubs get enough food and attention. These 6 would have been pushed aside by their larger siblings. But with equal care and attention, they're thriving, Rosa observed. More than thriving, Anton added. They're exceptional. Sarah picked up Star, who immediately began chittering contentedly. The question is, what do we do now? We can't hide them forever. Eventually, someone is going to ask questions. Dr. Webb looked concerned. If the Zephyrian authorities find out, they'll demand the cubs back. And given that these cubs were deliberately abandoned, they'll kill them, Rosa finished bluntly. Sarah looked at each of the cubs. Now playing together in a complex game they had invented that involved stacking tools in precise patterns. They had grown into beautiful, intelligent creatures under human care. They trusted their human families completely. Then, we make sure the authorities don't find out, Sarah said firmly. At least not until these cubs are old enough and strong enough to make their own choices. The crew nodded in agreement. They had made their commitment to these small lives, and they would see it through but in the vast network of space communications. Word was already spreading about a human ship that had spent an unusual amount of time at an abandoned Zephyrian facility. And certain parties were beginning to ask questions about what the humans might have found there. The research station orbiting Proxima Centauri AB was not exactly designed for raising alien children, but Dr. Elena Vasquez had done her best to make it work. The xenobiologist had been studying interspecies development for 20 years, but she had never had subjects like the 6 Zephyrian cubs. Remarkable, she said to Captain Chun as they watched the cubs through the observation window. In just 4 months, they've surpassed every developmental milestone I had for young Zephyrians. The cubs, now about the size of human 10-year-olds, but with the sleek, graceful build of their species, were working together on a complex engineering problem that Rosa had given them. They had been asked to design a better air filtration system for the research station. Star stood at the center of the group, pointing at different parts of their design with her clawed finger. Her golden eyes were bright with concentration as she explained her ideas. Twin and Spot worked on the technical drawings, their movements perfectly synchronized. Pepper was building a small model to test their theories, while Salt carefully checked all their calculations. Luna sat slightly apart, observing the whole process and occasionally offering quiet suggestions that the others always listened to carefully. The most interesting thing, Dr. Vasquez continued, is how they approach problems. Most Zephyrian young are taught to compete with each other, to prove individual dominance. But these cubs collaborate naturally. Dr. Webb, who had become the cubs' primary caregiver and teacher, nodded. They've been raised with human values. Cooperation instead of competition. Inclusion instead of hierarchy. And look at the results, Rosa added as she reviewed the cubs' filtration design. This is brilliant. They found a solution that none of us thought of. They're using biomimicry based on how their own respiratory systems work, but applying it to mechanical systems. Sarah watched Star gesture excitedly as she explained something to Anton, who was helping with the material science aspects of the project. The cub had grown into a natural leader, but not the dominating kind that Zephyrian society valued. Instead, she led by inspiring others and bringing out their best abilities. "Star," Sarah called out, "how did you come up with this design?" The young Zephyrian bounded over, her movements fluid and graceful. "We thought about how we breathe," she said in fluent English, though her accent still carried the musical tones of her native language. "Our lungs filter air in layers, different parts catching different particles. So we made machine lungs that do the same thing. But the innovation is in how they implemented it," Dr. Vasquez explained to Sarah. "Each cub contributed their unique strengths. Star provided the biological insight. Twin and Spot handled the engineering. Pepper made it buildable. Salt ensured it was efficient. And Luna made sure it was safe." Sarah smiled. "Just like humans do. Everyone contributing what they're best at." That evening, Sarah found the cubs in their common area, engaged in what had become their nightly routine, storytelling. But tonight was different. Instead of listening to human stories, Star was telling the others a tale she had created herself. "And the small hunter knew that the pack had left him behind," Star said, her voice dramatic and expressive. "But instead of giving up, he found other small hunters who had also been left behind. Together, they became stronger than any pack." Sarah felt a chill. This wasn't just a story. It was the cubs processing their own experience. Luna, the thoughtful one, raised her paw. But why did the pack leave them? In the story, I mean. Star's ears flattened slightly. Because the pack leaders thought only the biggest and strongest should survive. They thought the small hunters would make the pack weak. "That's stupid," Pepper said firmly. "We're not weak. We're different." Salt nodded in agreement. "Humans say diversity makes groups stronger, not weaker." Dr. Vasquez, who had been listening from the doorway, entered the room. "Can I ask you all a question?" The cubs turned to her with respectful attention. They had learned human concepts of politeness and consideration. "What do you think makes someone strong?" Twin and Spot exchanged one of their silent communications before Twin answered. "Working together. Helping others. Solving problems that no one else can solve. Learning new things," Luna added quietly. "Understanding how things work. Being kind to people who are smaller or scared," Star said firmly. "Protecting them instead of hurting them." Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances with Sarah. These were not typical Zephyrian values. Traditional Zephyrian culture emphasized individual strength, competitive dominance, and survival of the fittest. The cubs had been raised with completely different principles. The next morning brought an unexpected challenge. Dr. Vasquez was conducting routine physical examinations when she discovered something troubling. "Captain," she called Sarah to the medical bay. "We need to talk." Sarah found the doctor reviewing genetic scans of the cubs. "What is it?" "I've been analyzing their DNA, comparing it to standard Zephyrian genetic markers," Dr. Vasquez explained. "These cubs weren't just abandoned because they were small. Look at this." She showed Sarah a complex genetic analysis. Each of these cubs carries genetic variations that Zephyrian society considers defective. Star has enhanced pattern recognition abilities, but reduced physical aggression. Twin and Spot have increased cooperative instincts, but lowered competitive drives. Luna has heightened analytical capabilities, but decreased dominance behaviors. So they were abandoned because they were genetically different? Exactly. In Zephyrian society, these traits would be seen as weaknesses. But under human care, they've become strengths. Sarah studied the data. What would have happened to them in normal Zephyrian society? They would have been outcasts, possibly killed by stronger cubs competing for resources. At best, they would have lived as subordinates, never allowed to mate or contribute to society. But they're brilliant, Sarah protested. They're solving problems. That stumped trained engineers. Because we've given them the opportunity to develop their natural talents instead of forcing them to compete in ways they were never designed for. That afternoon, Sarah called a meeting with all the Cubs. They gathered in the station's main conference room, sitting around the table like young professionals. I need to ask you all a serious question, Sarah began. You're old enough now to understand your situation. You were abandoned by your own people and raised by humans. What do you want for your future? The Cubs exchanged glances. Star spoke first, as usual. We want to stay with our families, she said simply. You are our families. But, Luna added thoughtfully, we also want to help other Cubs like us. Ones who might be abandoned or hurt. We could be bridges, Twin suggested, between humans and Zephyrians. Show them that different doesn't mean weak, Spot continued. Finishing her sister's thought as always, Pepper bounced in her seat excitedly. We could teach them what you taught us. That everyone has value. Salt nodded seriously. That strength comes from helping others, not hurting them. Sarah felt pride swell in her chest, but also worry. You understand that this might be dangerous? Not all Zephyrians will appreciate what you represent. Star's eyes hardened with determination that reminded Sarah of the day they first rescued the Cubs. Then we show them. We prove that we're not mistakes to be thrown away. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward. There's something else you should know. I've been monitoring Zephyrian communications. There are reports of scout ships in this sector. They're looking for something. Looking for what? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Missing genetic samples from the abandoned facilities. Specifically, genetic samples that might have been taken by salvage crews. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. They're looking for us, Star said. Quietly, Sarah reached over and took the young Zephyrian's hand. Then we need to be ready for them. The Cubs had been raised with human values of cooperation, inclusion, and protection of the vulnerable. Soon, they would have to prove that those values were stronger than the traditional Zephyrian belief in survival of the fittest. The education phase was ending. The real test was about to begin. Outside the station, unknown to its occupants, a sleek Zephyrian scout ship was already moving through the system, following energy signatures and communication traces. Commander Crickstall studied the data from his sensor station with growing certainty. The missing Cubs were here, and soon they would be brought back where they belonged. The alarm pierced through the research station like a knife. Captain Chun rolled out of her bunk and was running toward the command center before she was fully awake. Red emergency lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow. Report, she barked as she entered the control room. Dr. Vasquez was at the sensors, her face pale. 3 Zephyrian military vessels just dropped out of hyperspace. They're broadcasting demand codes for inspection and retrieval of stolen property. Sarah's blood ran cold. Stolen property? They claim we have genetic samples that belong to the Zephyrian government, Rosa said from the communication station. They're demanding immediate surrender of all biological materials. Where are the Cubs? Sarah asked. Safe room, Dr. Webb reported. I moved them there as soon as the ships appeared. Sarah studied the tactical display. 3 ships against their single research vessel. Not good odds, but they weren't going down without a fight. Captain Chun, a cold voice spoke through the communication system in heavily accented English. I am Commander Crickstall of the Zephyrian Defense Force. You will prepare to be boarded immediately. Sarah activated the reply channel. This is Captain Chun. You're in violation of neutral space treaties. You have no authority here. We have authority to retrieve stolen Zephyrian property, Crixto replied. Surrender the genetic samples, and we will allow you to depart unharmed. We're not carrying any stolen property, Commander. A pause, then Crixto's voice returned, colder than before. Captain, we have traced energy signatures and biological readings to your vessel. Do not insult my intelligence. The defective specimens will be returned for proper disposal. Disposal. Sarah felt rage building in her chest, but she kept her voice level. I don't know what you're talking about. Very well. Prepare to be boarded. Sarah cut the transmission and turned to her crew. Options? We can't outfight 3 military vessels, Rosa admitted. But we might be able to outrun them. Their ships are big and powerful, but not very fast. The question is where we run to, Dr. Webb said. They'll track us anywhere in Zephyrian space. Then, we don't go to Zephyrian space, Sarah decided. We head for Harmony Station. Neutral territory with Galactic Council protection. That's a 4-day journey at maximum speed, Dr. Vasquez warned. Can we stay ahead of them that long? Before anyone could answer, Star's voice came through the intercom from the safe room. Captain Chun, we want to help. Sarah hesitated. The Cubs were brilliant, but they were still children facing their own people's military. Please, Star continued. We know Zephyrian ships. We've been studying them. We can help you escape. Sarah made a decision that would have horrified any military commander. Bring them to the bridge. Minutes later, all 6 Cubs entered the command center. They moved with the fluid grace that came naturally to their species, but Sarah could see the tension in their posture. Star stepped forward as their unofficial spokesperson. The Zephyrian ships are using standard pursuit formation, she said, studying the tactical display with remarkable calm for someone being hunted by her own species. But they have a weakness. What kind of weakness? Rosa asked. Twin and Spot moved to the navigation controls. Their sensors are calibrated for tracking large ships, Twin explained. But small objects create false readings, Spot continued. If we launch enough debris, we can confuse their targeting systems. Luna looked up from the engineering station she was examining. Also, their communication arrays use rotating frequencies to prevent jamming. But the pattern is predictable if you know Zephyrian mathematics. Are you suggesting we jam their communications? Dr. Webb asked. Not jam, Luna said with a slight smile that reminded Sarah why she had named this cub for the moon. Redirect. Make them think we're going a different direction. Sarah stared at the Cubs. You're planning a military deception against trained soldiers. We're using what they taught us against them, Star said firmly. They expect us to run in panic like weak prey. But we're not weak, and we're not prey. The next few hours became the most intense of Sarah's career. Working with the Cubs, her crew implemented a deception plan that was both brilliant and audacious. They launched a spread of debris configured to mimic their ship's energy signature, while the real ship changed course using a trajectory that minimized sensor contact. It's working, Rosa reported with amazement. They're following the false trail. But their celebration was short-lived. One of the Zephyrian ships broke off from the pursuit and headed directly for their actual position. They're not fools, Dr. Vasquez said grimly. They hedged their bets. The pursuing ship was faster than expected. Within hours, it had matched their course and was closing rapidly. They'll be in weapons range in 20 minutes, Rosa announced. Captain, Star said quietly, there's something else we can try. But you have to trust us completely. Sarah looked at the young Zephyrian. Star's golden eyes were serious and determined. Around her, the other Cubs nodded in agreement. What do you have in mind? Let them catch us, Star said. Are you insane? Anton exploded. They want to kill you. No, Luna said calmly. They want to capture us. There's a difference. And that gives us an opportunity. 23 minutes later, The Zephyrian ship had caught up and was demanding surrender. Commander Cricksteel's ship docked with their research vessel, and armed soldiers boarded. Sarah and her crew were herded into the main cargo bay while the Zephyrians searched the ship. The Cubs had hidden in a specially prepared section behind false bulkheads. But Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before they were found. When the soldiers finally located the Cubs, Sarah expected them to be dragged out in chains. Instead, she heard excited chittering and what sounded like an argument in the Zephyrian language. "What are they saying?" she asked Dr. Webb quietly. Webb, who had learned some Zephyrian during his time caring for the Cubs, listened carefully. "The soldiers are confused. The Cubs are talking to them." Minutes later, the Cubs entered the cargo bay escorted by puzzled-looking Zephyrian soldiers. But instead of looking defeated, the Cubs appeared calm and confident. Commander Crick still followed them in. He was a typical Zephyrian military officer, tall, powerfully built, with silver fur marked by scars from combat. His yellow eyes held the cold efficiency of a career soldier. "These are the missing specimens," he announced to his soldiers. "Prepare them for transport." "Commander," Star said clearly in the Zephyrian language, "we request permission to speak." Crickstall's ears twitched with surprise. "Specimens do not make requests." "We are not specimens," Star replied, switching to English so the humans could understand. "We are citizens of the galaxy with the right to speak for ourselves. You are defective genetic material that was abandoned for proper disposal," Crickstall said coldly. "You have no rights." "Then explain this," Twin said, producing a small device she and Spot had built during the journey. Before anyone could react, the device activated and projected a holographic display, showing the filtration system the Cubs had designed at the research station. But this wasn't just a display, it was a working model, complete with airflow patterns and efficiency calculations. The Zephyrian soldiers stared in amazement. The technology was clearly superior to any in their own systems. "Impossible," one of the soldiers muttered in Zephyrian. "Defects cannot create superior technology." "We also did this," Pepper said, activating another device that began analyzing the air composition in the cargo bay and suggesting improvements to the ship's life support systems. "And this," Salt added, producing mathematical proofs for more efficient hyperspace calculations. "Commander," Crickstall stared at the Cubs with growing confusion. "This must be human technology. You are merely operating devices built by others." "Test us," Star challenged. "Give us any engineering problem, any mathematical equation, any tactical scenario. Let us prove that we are not defects, but individuals with unique abilities." Sarah watched as doubt crept into the commander's expression. This wasn't what he had expected to find. The reports had described weak, abandoned Cubs, not confident young beings challenging him to test their abilities. But before Crickstall could respond, alarms began blaring throughout his ship. Emergency lights flashed, and automated voices announced a critical system failure in the engineering section. "Commander," a voice called through the communication system, "we have a cascade failure in the primary power coupling. If we can't stop it, we'll lose life support." Crickstall's face went pale. Sarah had seen that look before, the expression of a commander facing a crisis that could kill everyone under his command. "Sir," Luna said quietly, "we can fix that." Crickstall stared at her. "What did you say?" "The power coupling failure. It's a resonance cascade in the dilithium matrix. We studied your ship's schematics when we were planning our escape. We know how to stop it." "You're lying. No child could understand such complex engineering." "Then let us try," Star said simply. "What do you have to lose? If we fail, you're dead anyway. If we succeed—" She left the sentence hanging. Commander Crickstall looked at his soldiers, then at the humans, then back at the Cubs. These small beings, who were supposed to be genetic failures, were offering to save his ship and crew. "Very well," he said finally. "But if this is a trick—" "It's not," Star assured him. "We don't let people die if we can help it. That's what humans taught us." The diplomatic chambers of Harmony Station were designed to intimidate. Representatives from dozens of species could observe the proceedings from elevated galleries, while the main floor featured a circular arrangement of seats that put all parties on equal footing. Today, however, the tension in the room made equality feel like a distant concept. Captain Sarah Chun sat with her crew on one side of the circle. Across from them, High Council member Velthor dominated the Zephyrian delegation. He was massive, even for his species, with silver fur streaked with scars and eyes like chips of yellow ice. Beside him, Commander Crickstall looked uncomfortable, his gaze frequently drifting to where the cubs sat with the humans. The cubs themselves had grown noticeably in the weeks since the incident on Crickstall's ship. They were now almost adult size, though their movements still carried the quick grace of youth. Star sat closest to Sarah, her golden eyes calm and alert. The others flanked them, presenting a united front. "This proceeding is a waste of time," Velthor announced in his deep, rumbling voice. "The specimens belong to the Zephyrian Empire. They must be returned for proper disposal." Galactic Mediator the Sarian, a tall, elegant being from the Centauri system, raised her hand for order. "High Council member Velthor, the beings in question have requested to speak for themselves. Under galactic law, all sentient individuals have that right. They are genetic defects," Velthor growled. "They have no legal standing." "With respect," Star said, rising gracefully from her seat, "we are here to prove otherwise." Velthor's laugh was harsh and mocking. "Defective specimens do not prove anything. They are inferior by design, weaklings that were correctly identified and removed from the gene pool." Sarah felt her anger building, but Star placed a gentle paw on her arm. The young Zephyrian stepped forward to address the mediator. "Honored Desarian, we request permission to demonstrate our capabilities." "Granted," the mediator replied. "What do you propose?" Twin and Spot moved together to the center of the chamber, carrying a complex device they had built during the journey to Harmony Station. "We will solve 3 problems that have been submitted to the Galactic Council but remain unsolved." They activated their device, and 3 holographic displays appeared in the air above the assembly. The first showed a mathematical equation that had stumped the best minds in the galaxy for decades. The second displayed the schematic for a proposed terraforming system that engineers claimed was impossible to build. The third showed a diplomatic crisis between 2 species that had defied resolution for 5 years. "Impossible," Velthor scoffed. "No one has solved these problems." "Watch," Star said simply. What followed was 15 minutes of the most impressive intellectual display Sarah had ever witnessed. Working together, the 6 cubs dismantled each problem with systematic precision. Luna provided the mathematical insight that cracked the equation. Pepper and Salt developed the engineering solutions that made the terraforming system feasible. Twin and Spot created a communication protocol that addressed the diplomatic crisis. When they finished, the chamber was silent. Mediator the Sarian studied the solutions with growing amazement. "These appear to be correct. All 3 problems have been solved. Verification teams will need weeks to confirm this," protested a representative from the Galactic Engineering Council. "Then test them," Star challenged. "But while you do, ask yourself, if we are defective, how did we accomplish what your best minds could not?" Velthor's fur bristled with anger. "Tricks. Deception. Humans have contaminated you with their inferior methods." That was when Sarah had had enough. She stood slowly, her movement drawing every eye in the chamber. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but carried clearly to every corner of the room. "Inferior methods?" Sarah's eyes locked with Velthor's. Let me tell you about inferior methods. We found these cubs abandoned on a dead asteroid, left to starve to death in the dark. 6 children, discarded like garbage because they didn't fit your narrow definition of perfection. They were correctly identified as genetic failures. Velther snarled. They were babies, Sarah shot back, her voice rising. Innocent children who deserved love and care and the chance to prove their worth. But you left them to die. She took a step forward, and despite being a fraction of Velther's size, the massive Zephyrian seemed to shrink back. You left those cubs to die, Sarah said, each word hitting like a hammer blow. But humans rescued them and made them stronger. The chamber erupted. Zephyrian delegates roared in outrage. Other species representatives began arguing among themselves. Velther rose to his full imposing height, his claws extended. How dare you? He bellowed. The Zephyrian way has produced the strongest warriors, the most efficient society, the most successful empire in this sector. And what has it produced today? Star asked quietly, but her voice somehow carried over the chaos. The arguing stopped. Everyone turned to look at the young Zephyrian. What has your way produced in this chamber? Star continued. Anger, hatred, the desire to destroy rather than create. You call us defective, but look at what we've accomplished. Look at what humans taught us was possible. She gestured to her companions. Twin and Spot learned that cooperation produces better results than competition. Pepper and Salt discovered that joy and laughter make work easier, not harder. Luna found that observation and patience reveal truths that aggression misses. And I learned that protecting the weak makes everyone stronger, not weaker. Commander Crickstill suddenly stood. The scarred warrior had been silent through most of the proceedings, but now he stepped forward. High Council Member Velther, he said formally. I request permission to speak. Velther glared at his subordinate. Granted. These beings saved my ship and crew, Crickstill announced to the chamber. When my engineers failed to prevent a cascade failure that would have killed 200 soldiers, these defective specimens solved the problem in minutes. They saved lives they had no obligation to save, lives that belonged to people hunting them. He turned to face Viola directly. Sir, with respect, perhaps our definition of defective needs examination. Velther's eyes blazed with fury. Are you questioning Zephyrian genetic science? I'm questioning whether strength is only measured by the ability to dominate others, Crickstill replied steadily. These young ones showed me a different kind of strength. The strength to help rather than harm. The strength to solve rather than destroy. The strength to forgive rather than revenge. Dr. Vasquez stood and activated her portable display. If I may, I'd like to share some genetic analysis. Data flowed across the chamber's screens, showing complex DNA structures and protein sequences. What you call genetic defects, Dr. Vasquez explained, are actually beneficial mutations. Enhanced pattern recognition, increased empathy responses, improved cooperative instincts. Under the right conditions, these traits provide significant advantages. Under human conditions, Velther spat, they remain weaknesses in the real world? The real world? Luna spoke for the first time in the proceedings, her quiet voice somehow commanding attention. The real world where problems require solutions, not violence? Where different species must cooperate to survive? Where the greatest challenges need minds working together rather than fighting each other? She stood gracefully, moving to stand beside Star. You call us defective because we don't fit your ancient ideas about strength. But we just solve problems that your strongest warriors and smartest scientists couldn't touch. Which of us is really stronger? One by one, the other cubs joined Star and Luna in the center of the chamber. They stood together, not in defiance, but in quiet confidence. We choose to stay with our human families, Star announced. They found us when we had nothing. They gave us love when we had been abandoned. They taught us that strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. But, Twin said, taking her sister's paw, we also choose to help others like us. Other cubs who might be abandoned. Spock continued. Other beings who are considered defective. Pepper added. Other children who just need someone to believe in them. Salt finished. Mediator Thessarian looked around the chamber. I believe I've heard enough testimony. The ruling of this tribunal is that the 6 Zephyrian individuals have demonstrated full sentience and capacity for self-determination. They are free to choose their own futures. Furthermore, she continued, their demonstration today suggests that the Galactic Council should establish a formal cultural exchange program between humans and Zephyrians. There appears to be much both species could learn from each other. Velthor's roar of rage echoed through the chamber, but it was drowned out by approving sounds from dozens of other species. As the formal proceedings ended and beings began filing out, Sarah found herself approached by Commander Crixtel. Captain Chen, the scarred warrior, said quietly, I want you to know that there are others in our military who have begun asking questions. What these young ones represent is not as foreign to us as the High Council claims. He glanced toward where the cubs were being congratulated by representatives from several species. Change is coming to the Zephyrian Empire, he said. It may take time, but it's coming. And when it does, we'll need teachers. Beings who understand both our ways and better ways.